Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Okay, friends, thank you for being here. Hope you're healthy, safe. We'll continue with the Diamond Sutra with, again, the proviso that you understand that we're studying these earlier sutras from the perspective of the culminating teachings of Shakyamuni, and that is of the Lotus Sutra method for attaining immediate perfect enlightenment. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. So we go on with the conversation here between Shakyamuni and Subhuti, a very well-studied monk. Subhuti is learning directly from Shakyamuni what the Bodhisattva mind is and how to course in that mind as a living human monk amongst the people, rather than wrapped up in a monastery, doing everything that monks did early on to try to disassemble their identification with a enduring self. So we've gone beyond that now, and we're talking about, okay, now you know that your existence is point to point, moment to moment, birth, death, birth, death, birth, death, birth, death, birth, death, and that you are not a permanent being, you are not a you per se, but a traveler of time as a particular sentient being, never a static thing. And now you need to course through the world with that understanding and participating and experiencing the world in that same way. So that when you see conditions and tendencies around you, your awareness of a being interacting with other beings, that their conditions and tendencies are manifestations of karma, energy and work, energy and materiality, materializations of energies, and you can witness their tendencies and conditions, which arise passion in you because you, as an enlightened monk, understand that they don't have to be coursing through samsara in that way, that their conditions and tendencies have enslaved their mind to experience those things which in fact are illusory and based on not the actual situation. This is where Nagarjuna's later commentary and middle way exemplify the emptiness of those attachments. Because those attachments are based on permanence, and there is no permanence. So those attachments are like grabbing air. They're empty. The real process that's going on, you're missing it. You're missing it because you haven't attuned your mind of Buddha, your mind of Bodhisattva with Buddha clarity to the actual situation, which is that you are an assemblage of energy moving through time, experiencing the world and your interaction in samsara. Thusly, you can free yourself from the bondage of those tendencies and conditions that bind you to the illusion of permanence and therefore cause you stress, anxiety, suffering. Okay? The Buddha said, Subhuti, what do you think? Does it occur to the Tathagata, in other words, the enlightened mind, I teach a dharma? We have to rely on these translations for what Shakyamuni is really trying to define and break apart in his dialogue. The translation is, I teach a dharma, in quotes. Is that how the Buddha mind would see its compassion to liberate others? As an I teach other, a dharma, a way, a raft to another shore. Subhuti replies, no, indeed, Bhagavan, it does not occur to the Tathagata, I teach a dharma. Because in the Buddha mind, there is no I. What do you identify as the I? It's like the subtext of the last video. I said, you can think about thought, and you can think about your own thoughts or thought in general. But where's the thought coming from? Who's thinking about the thought? What is thinking about the thought? And in Buddhism, all of that is distraction. Just be in the thought. So for instance, if I'm coursing in the Buddha mind as a Bodhisattva, a samsaric entity with Buddha clarity, it doesn't occur to me that I'm creating a video for you to strengthen your practice. My Buddha mind says, this Buddha mind is the way to enjoying the magnificence of this opportunity, this life. And the Buddha mind simply wants you to do the same, wants you to know this. The Buddha mind doesn't say, I am now going to help you. The Buddha mind says, be here. Be enlightened. This is where it's at. The Buddha mind is just being in samsara unattached. Sharing, hey, be this. But the Buddha mind isn't attached to speaking, to identification, to addressing tendencies and conditions in others. So the Buddha mind's compassion manifests through Bodhisattva. It's actually a different state of mind. The Buddha mind transcends itself only to manufacture its compassion, its desire to guide, to help, to instantiate Buddha. The helping part, the identification part, is a slippery slope that the Bodhisattva, thoroughly trained, self-trained, assists others to Buddha way. But is it an entity teaching an entity? Since Buddha already exists in you, other, is it I am teaching you the way? Or is it more, hey, you have this, be this. Whatever you have to do to get to this, I support you in doing that. Do that. Do you see that teaching isn't happening from Buddha mind or Bodhisattva coursing in Buddha mind in samsara to you or other? Because you already know. You already have Buddhahood. You're just not choosing to experience it. What's the problem? What's in the way? And as I've said many, many times, but in a different way, you're the teacher. And you don't teach anyone. You teach you. This is that dual mind. You can call it a choice and be flippant about it, or you can call it retraining your mind to see the truth of your nature and the nature of all phenomena, or you can stay attached to your stress and anxieties and suffering, living and experiencing the illusion of permanence in your tendencies and conditions. That's all just the stuff of humanness. But your mind doesn't need to be stuck there. Your mind can see this amazing mechanism, the apparatus of experiencing rather than being. It's not so important to be. It's important to experience. That's a different mind. Does that make more sense? So somebody witnessing, well, first of all, witnessing me right now would say, who's he talking to? An object, right? But if they understood the technology, it would say, he is trying to teach people. Well, maybe that's a convenient set of words to describe what I'm doing. But what I'm attempting to do is to give you, share insights of the Dharma for you to inculcate into your thinking so that you can reflexively think, what is this I am hearing, exhorting to be, what is being shared with me, and how do I inculcate it into my epistemology, my way of thinking, the way I build my experience. Because the way we build our experience in samsara is by thingifying, making permanent, making endure everything we see, taste, touch, right? Our senses are very programmed to collect data. And that's fine if your life isn't just dedicated to observing that collected data. That's samsaric suffering. If you can let that machinery go on, apparatus, and peak your mind above the mechanism, you can then see with a very different mind the amazing apparatus. Make sense? And isn't that fundamentally what we call education of anything? It's a self-teaching of parameters, conditions, tendencies, right? And we assemble them into something we call knowledge. But the Buddha knowledge isn't a categorization of things. In the parlance of Shakyamuni, the education and the classification of things is called the classification of things because it is no classification of things. Because the Buddha does never think the thought, I am classifying things. And why? Because the Buddha talks about these things as classifications of things, quote unquote. They're not classifications of things. That's an activity we fool ourselves with, create illusions of endurance. Consider that for a moment. The next time you sit in front of your Butsudan and you focus your eye consciousness on the mandala and you start to recite with your mouth, throat, voice, tongue, sense, breathing, your body, rhythm, hearing, Myoho Renge Kyo, Namu Myoho Renge Kyo, Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Consider that every time you chant or recite the words in the Gongyo, you are enlivening that Buddha mind, and your human mind, your Bodhisattva mind, is retraining itself to exist, to persist, to course in that unillusioned, unattached mind, Myoho Renge Kyo, Buddha mind. Consider how that training of your own mind is happening instantaneously without your putting so much language around it, and consider how difficult it is for Subhuti to get that same lesson without the tool. Although we're getting there in the history of the teachings, Shakyamuni needs people to understand at the root what is happening here. For you and I, it is incredibly simple, universal, anyone can do it, and instantaneous. The problem for you and I in this epoch, in this era, is not the difficulty of instantiating the Buddha mind. The problem for you and I is having the confidence that that's what's actually happening. This is why Nichiren spends so much time talking about determination, strong mind, conviction, resolve, because that's our slippery slope. Exceedingly easy to invoke our Buddha mind. Exceedingly muddied by our samsaric avarice. Gosh, we love stuff, right? We know this. We call our societies consumerist societies. We have become economic beasts, tools, cogs in an economic reality, which, if you break it down any way you want, has nothing to do with reality. Try to reason with a tree why it needs rubles, dollars, oil dollars, diamonds, gold, all these valuations, right? We talk about life like it has a value, a monetary value, an economic value. And yet we still have wars. Where's your value there? Where's your economics there? Oh yeah, we have to make lots of bullets and war tools. That puts people to work. Oh, forget all the people that are dying out there, and especially forget that the only people you're counting are your own, because those other humans, they don't have any value. It's a very, very sick time in history. Not that they didn't have war back then. We talk about Nichiren and the samurai authoritarian regimes, right? It's been with us all along. The way we value and devalue things. It's an economic formula. But today, we can't go an hour without, I wish I had a new one of these. Oh, if I only had. What is that? We're just so greedy for stuff. It's like we can't exist without. Oh, I got the new one. I'm better. Right? So this conversation between Shakyamuni Buddha and Subhuti, ownership isn't something physical. Or rather, it is the valuation of the physical that's the center of the problem. To the point that we identify as material, self, I, enduring. So all this conversation over and over again with Subhuti is trying to drive home the point of exactly what I'm explaining to you. And then he even goes and uses the example of 7 jewels and billions of worlds and on and on and on about actual material possessions to try to draw the analogy between your thoughts are doing the same thing as you running around with a bag of jewels. You can share those all day long, but you haven't really accomplished anything. This is why the Buddha talks about spreading around bags of jewels. It's ineffectual. It's samsara. It's rife with suffering and stress and anxiety. Even the teaching is not a teaching. It is a very feeble way, if you will, of communicating an exhortation, which is not unlike saying, why don't you just be enlightened? Right? Be Buddha. Am I teaching you to be Buddha? No. I'm exhorting you to be Buddha. Teach yourself how to let go of that stuff and be Buddha, because Buddha's already there. What are you doing? Thankfully, a Bodhisattva isn't so rude. Could be. Maybe that's not the rule. The rule is whatever you need to get off your samsaric laziness and avarice and just go about being enlightened. Goodness. What is the problem? Then there's a lot of notes in here by the authors, and they tend to lean towards Zen, although that's incorrect. But we study the Dharma wherever we can find it. My throat is drying out again. Apologies. Remember that today is the 30th. So after this video, I'm going to do a full Gangyo and post it later today for New Year's. Chapter 1. Thus I have heard, once the Bhagavan was dwelling near Sharasta in Anathapindara garden in the Jeta forest, together with the full assembly of 1,250 bhikkhus and a great many fearless bodhisattvas. One day before noon, the Bhagavan put on his patched robe and picked up his bowl and entered the capital of Sarasti for offerings. After begging for food in the city, eating a meal of rice, he returned to his daily rounds in the afternoon, put his robe and bowl away, washed his feet, sat down at the appointed seat. After crossing his legs and adjusting his body, he turned his awareness to what was before him. A number of bhikkhus then came up to where the Bhagavan was sitting. After touching their heads to his feet, they walked around him to the right 3 times and sat down to one side. Chapter 1. The remaining 31 chapters of this sutra attempt to explain what happens in the first. Essentially, they examine the nature of Buddhahood and the path that leads thereto. In the first chapter, we see what a Buddha does, which is not so different from our own daily round of existence, if we could only do what we do unhindered by attachments and see what we do unobstructed by delusions. Isn't that what I've been saying? What this sutra teaches us is how to transform attachments and delusions, how to be a Buddha, and it begins with a patched robe, an empty bowl, and the Buddha's daily practice of this teaching. What is the practice of a teaching? Answers? Isn't it just simply being that which is being taught? Dwelling, as it were, in Buddhahood? Chapter 2. On this occasion, the Venerable Subhuti was also present in the assembly. Rising from his seat, he uncovered one shoulder and touched his right knee to the ground, pressing his palms together and bowing to the Buddha, he said, "It is rare, Bhagavan, most rare indeed, Sugata, how the Tathagata, the Arhan, the fully enlightened one, blesses or rewards fearless bodhisattvas with the best of rewards. And it is rare, Bhagavan, how the Tathagata, the Arhan, the fully enlightened one, entrusts fearless bodhisattvas with the greatest of trusts. Even so, Bhagavan, if a noble son or daughter should set forth on the bodhisattva path, how should they stand? How should they walk? And how should they control their thoughts?" Remember, we read all this before. The Buddha told the Venerable Subhuti, "Well said, Subhuti. Well said. So it is, Subhuti. It is as you say. The Tathagata rewards fearless bodhisattvas with the best of rewards and entrusts fearless bodhisattvas with the greatest of trusts. You should therefore truly listen, Subhuti, and consider this well. I shall tell you how those who set forth on the bodhisattva path should stand, how they should walk, how they should control their thoughts." The Venerable Subhuti said, "May it be so, Bhagavan," and gave his full attention. So remember, we've been talking about this. Buddhism is about the mind, and certainly in the Perfection of Wisdom sutras, that is the core subject. How do I walk through the world with the mind of Buddha, the mind unattached, undiluted, unenduring, right? So we've already gone through all of this. Lots and lots of words, but all with the same mission. Chapter 3, the Buddha said to him, "Subhuti, those who would now set forth on the bodhisattva path should thus give birth to this thought." Quote, "However many beings there are in whatever realms of being might exist, whether they are born from an egg or born from a womb, born from the water or born from the air, whether they have form or no form, whether they have perception or no perception, or neither perception nor no perception, In whatever conceivable realm of being one might conceive of beings, in the realm of complete nirvana I shall liberate them all. And though I thus liberate countless beings, not a single being is liberated. And why not, Subhuti? A bodhisattva who creates the perception of a being cannot be called a bodhisattva. And why not, Subhuti? No one can be called a bodhisattva who creates the perception of a self, or creates the perception of a being, a life, or a soul. We've read this already, and I think I've covered it pretty much ad nauseum. But once again, just to review, to course in enlightenment is to course in the knowledge and I'm going to skip to a section that I outlined in yellow here. Yeah. Because of everything I've already said, we're just going to skip forward here and concentrate on that last statement. Attached to a self, a being, a life, a soul. Teng Neng says, quote, "The presence of thought and absence of awareness is the world of mortals." He's dissecting the thinking about thoughts. And thinking about thoughts or having thoughts without clear awareness, Buddha awareness, unattached awareness, is the place of mortals. In other words, samsara. The presence of thought and presence of awareness is the world of worthies. So if you can course as a bodhisattva, you will have thoughts, you're in samsara, but you're also aware, well, these people are termed worthies in China. Elites of thought, beings, great bodhisattva, great beings, right? There's all kinds of terms for this level of enlightenment, awakening. The absence of thought and presence of awareness is the world of sages. So rather than thoughts, in other words, enduring instantiations of endurance and coursing in the world with a clear mind of simply observation, awareness. These are great sages. These are people who teach without teaching. These are people who influence mortals and worthies to teach themselves how to course in awareness, in Buddha-ness. The wise can know something completely, but when it comes to talking about it, it's hard to express. Hallelujah. Right? Because expression, language, is of the world of attachments. Hard to speak in the world of attachments about unattachment. We can point to it, but accomplishing it is something personal that can only be achieved by the mind that perceives it. Hung Po says, quote, "Buddhas and beings share one and the same mind." Remember, this is 2,500 years ago, 2,700 years ago. Otherwise, they don't differ. This mind has never had any form or characteristics. It's not the brain, it's not squishy, it's not this big, it doesn't weigh this much. It doesn't have a form, the mind. It's something that courses. It has never been created. It has never been destroyed. Thus, it is right here. This mind is energy. If you think about it, you miss it. Because now you're trying to apply characteristics and form to something that has no characteristics or form. Follow? It's like the sky. It has no borders. Only this one mind is the Buddha. Buddhas and beings aren't different. However, beings are attached to seeking perceptions outside of themselves. But the more they seek, the more they get lost. It's the world of samsara. They send a Buddha to find a Buddha. That's very well put. They use the mind to chase the mind. They can exhaust themselves for kalpas, but they'll never succeed because Buddha's already there. It is the very energy from which your idea of self is built. It's just that your idea of an enduring self is getting in the way. They don't realize that when they put an end to thoughts and reasoning, the Buddha will appear before them. Namo Myo Renge Kyo, Namo Myo Renge Kyo, Namo Myo Renge. Ah, there's Buddha. This mind is the Buddha. The Buddha is an ordinary being. When it's an ordinary being, the mind doesn't contract. When it's a Buddha, it doesn't expand. When it meets conditions, it acts. When conditions end, it stops. It doesn't need to be pinned down or realized. It is already perfect. If you aren't willing to believe that this is the Buddha, even if you cultivate for countless kalpas, you will never reach the way. To cling to the perception of a dharma means that a dharma exists outside the mind. Hence, you are attached to perceptions. Whether you do evil or do good, you are attached to perceptions. When you do evil while attached to perception, you waste your rebirth. Your birth, death, birth, death, birth, death, birth, death. When you do good while attached to perceptions, you waste your hardships. All of that enduring amounts to nothing. Neither can compare with recognizing your own mind right now. The mind at work, observing. Outside this mind, there are no dharmas. This mind is the dharma. Outside this dharma, there is no mind. You can use the mind to eliminate the mind, but the mind still exists. And to cling to the perception of no dharmas means to allow perceptions of attachment and non-attachment, good and bad, mortal and sage, to continue to exist. Kanzi, our foremost translator or authority on the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, quote, "The reasoning here, though subtle, is quite intelligible. No separate dharma can possibly be perceived without a subjective act of perception taking place. Perception comes from per cap, and capio means to take hold of, seize, grasp. But to seize on anything, either a dharma or a no dharma, automatically involves an act of preference bound up with self-interest, self-assertion, and self-aggrandizement, and therefore unbecoming to the selfless." Yeah, I think I'm going to end there because we hit on a very meaty core aspect of what all of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras are centrally about. And there are other sutras, and as we get deeper into the diamond, I'm sure we'll hit it. But Kanzi, with the full text of the Perfection of Wisdom and the several texts that he expands on, there are entire repetitive chapters on the nature of perfecting the mind, how the mind perceives, how we thingify. Brilliant word. And it's the thingification that creates all of our misunderstanding of coursing in this brilliant life, this brilliant experience of experience. All of it, no matter how exhaustively we work these word soups and salads around the subject, we instantiate immediately when we use this mandala to push away distractions and we focus. And what did Nichiren say? Single-mindedly meet the Buddha. Be with the Buddha. Instantiate, not even instantiate, experience Buddha. It's the energy that is core of all things. And in samsara, we have this wonderful opportunity to experience it. We can't experience it outside of samsara. That's why when our physical materiality dies, it's called extinction. Because there is no perceiver. That's our only gift, our only opportunity, our only raison d'être, literally, in this samsara. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Everything else is stress and anxiety. It's delusion. It's not about this life, this way of experience, this samsaric reality. It's not beholden to a Federal Reserve Bank. Right? I mean, it sounds silly to say, but that's how we tend to course unenlightened in the world. The pressures, the peer pressures, the economic realities, the wars, the competitions. It's all such nonsense. Okay. Lest I run into my own words, as I feel I often do, I will leave it at that. Please enjoy teaching yourself, seeing your own, on your own, Buddha. Understand how amazing an opportunity it is to run into this teaching only for the fact that it helps to spur on in your own mind a correction, a lens, and oh yeah, of your life. Especially when you think you're experiencing troubles, stress, anxiety of any sort. Understand that that's a temporary, made-up thing. But Sifu, I'm going to lose my house. Yeah, that may happen. It's not life-ending. Stars explode, turn into black holes. Conservation of matter. Does that enter into this anywhere? You don't go away because you have troubles. just try perceiving them differently. Try perceiving them through not being attached to them. Don't beat yourself up because you're swinging at clouds. You're swinging at the dust around Pigpen. It doesn't change Pigpen. I have a feeling I'm going to be using that analogy again. Right? Just experience this moment. See it for what it is. A moment. If you don't like where you are in this moment, you can look back several moments and see how this moment came about. You need to change those habits, those ideas, those thoughts, those anchors, those things you can't do without, those endurances. And you need to either get rid of them, change. It's much easier to replace thinking than it is to simply eliminate it. Because the mind is the mind. It's constantly coursing. And you could change its trajectory. Right? What do I always say? Influence, influenced. Momentum. It's moving. It's kinetic. It has momentum. You can alter the path, the over time moment. You can adjust its direction. You can take the very same tendencies and conditions and you can push them to an ameliorated instantiation. You can change it, but you have to look at samsara from a freed mind, from a mind that is observing it without qualification, without good, bad, self, soul, all of that. That just obliterates your ability to see what's going on. It totally anchors you to the deluded. Make sense? All right. That's it for today. Thank you so much for participating, for your support. Like, subscribe, share. Go to Patreon. Use the PayPal me /Sifu Faith. PayPal.me/Sifu Sylvain. I swear I'll remember that someday. Anyway, there's all kinds of messages on this video that you can stop and write down. The best thing you can do with this resource is teach yourself. Because you have the answers are already there. You just need to know how to get your mind to see them. Your mind is not my mind. Our Buddha minds are Buddha. But our samsaric minds, we all have billions of little subtleties. And though we may share our excitement, our dedication, our resolve for Buddha-ness, we all come to that understanding in our own way. So please, I hope this encourages you. You have all the answers. It is your path. No one can give it to you. No one can take it from you. Instantiate your Buddha mind now, today. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. I'll see you in the next one.